All right, this is a very big game. It should be a fun game. It's two teams who have shown flashes for sure this year and the last couple of years. Also, two teams, when they've hit low points, it's kind of been a little confounding. Like, do we need to reassess who we think these teams are? And directly at the quarterback position here, Teague. Both quarterbacks a little something to prove, including last year's defending MVP.
Yeah, no, Lamar Jackson, it's all about the evolution for him. And, can he become more accurate throwing the ball outside the hashes? Because we know that Mark Andrews, his tight end, is one of the best tight ends in football because he gets a lot of the targets when the Baltimore Ravens drop back to throw the ball. But, Lamar's stripes aren't going to change overnight. They're not going to he's not all of a sudden going to figure it out and become this great passer. The way that the Ravens are going to be successful this year and into next year, BT, is by running the football. And if teams are loading up to stop it, they got to find more creative ways to get the ball to the edges, or I don't know, maybe use Hollywood Brown a little bit differently, who's been asking to be involved differently. But we can't come into this weekend and really the rest of the season and just expect this miraculous evolution of Lamar Jackson. It's just not going to happen. And so Greg Roman, who is the offensive coordinator, has a big task because teams have started to figure them out. Right, they figured out to play, these more college-like defenses where you rover or have a striker or rover, one of these guys that just mirrors the quarterback and stays in the box. And if he does have a traditional drop back, he falls into some sort of zone blanket type of coverage. But it's gotten easier to stop those zone reads. It's why he hasn't had those explosive plays that we used to see the last couple of years.
Yeah, and it's also been a pretty uneven performance thus far for Ryan Tannehill.
Very.
The way the season began, coming off the contract, coming off a great playoff run, Ryan Tannehill, first of all, it was easy to get behind Ryan Tannehill because, I think most of us knew that he was in a bad situation. Listen, you didn't have to even know much about football to know that you were in a bad situation with the Dolphins before this recent renaissance here with Flores and Tua, obviously. But they were a disaster for 20 years. Multiple head coaches, multiple coordinators, multiple quarterbacks. And Ryan Tannehill, actually, when he played, was not bad.
No.
And the numbers back that up. And if you look at what Adam Gase has done with my team, Adam Gase was basically Don Shula with them. Compared to Ryan. Now, Ryan Tannehill got hurt a few times, not just once, twice. And they decided to obviously let him go. He did make a few bucks from them. They didn't let him go right away. They picked him, first-round pick back in the day. But he did make some money, and then they eventually cut him, and he wound up going for, I think it was $8 or $9 million with Tennessee, a nominal fee, and he wound up taking the job, and he soared to great heights last year. But so the continuation this year was like, oh, man, maybe Ryan Tannehill, this is just a real great chapters, or these are great chapters, not chapter. He comes out, 2 touchdowns, week 1, boom, they win. Next game, boom, 4 touchdowns, they win. All right, a little bit of a blip against the Vikings. They win, didn't play well, but boom, next game, 3 touchdowns. Next game, 4 touchdowns. And then all of a sudden, you had back-to-back, the last 2 games he's played, he's been sub 200 yards. Passing in totality. And it's amazing because he's on pace for 36 touchdowns, 36 touchdowns, and a mere nominal 5 interceptions, but the yardage, 3,700 yards, which in today's NFL is not much, and more in line with the 90s or even the 80s, or maybe even more like the 70s, actually. But I watch Tannehill now, and for somebody who has always supported him, I really did. I didn't know that he would be as good as he was last year, but I didn't think that he was trash, as a lot of people did. I'm now beginning to wonder, I don't want to say if they gave the wrong guy that amount of money.
Yeah.
But he's got to show something now because the last few weeks he has not looked good.
It's all about the supporting staff too, BT. Let's not forget, and you mentioned this a couple of times 2 weeks ago, Taylor Wan is out. He's down with an ACL injury.
And that's where really this swoon coincides.
That's exactly where it coincided, BT. They're offensively, I think he's thrown for 200 yards, under 200 yards.
Last 2 games, back-to-back, under 200 yards.
Right? So it's just – and that's because the completions aren't there. The time isn't there. The running game hasn't been as stout as it historically has been with Derrick Henry. Now, it's kind of new with Derrick Henry being the guy for the whole season. Let's not forget, like last year – he was kind of like, he was the starter, but he was like the part-time starter.
Yeah.
You remember? Like Deion Lewis was changing, switching in and out. I'm like, what the heck are you guys doing?
I don't know.
And then they went to the postseason, or got close to the postseason. They started feeding the big man, and he started taking over. But yeah, you lose a key offensive lineman. The pressure picks up, your clock picks up, and Ryan Tannehill turns average again, and that's what you're fighting. The other thing is that it's simple. Right, what they do is not complicated. It's not like all these pre-snap motions and these things that conflict you and make you make a decision or declare what you're trying to do so he can see it. It's really just line up, run the ball. Let's do some play action and push the ball down the field. Otherwise, you got to. It's just execution, a simple offense, and that's not really hard or complicated to figure out.
Yep. Now, this is why you have to watch the games, because as much as we're lamenting the recent play of Ryan Tannehill, Hollywood Brown also dropped a 65-yard touchdown that was dumped in his hands. That would change the stats, would change the performance in terms of who won the game. So you have to be fair.
You mean A.J. Brown?
Pardon me, A.J. Brown, correct. You have to be fair to Ryan Tannehill. I do think that I'm deep enough into the season, and I've watched enough of both of these teams to really believe that neither will have much of an influence when it's time to really see who's going to the Super Bowl. I just agree. I don't see it. You don't either.
Tennessee's defense has gotten so bad, BT. Remember last year they weren't great last year, but they were stout. Like they were smart. They didn't give up a ton of big plays. When they needed to crunch, when the field got short, they crunched down. You're kicking field goals, and you're having these ugly games that you could win. Meaning Tennessee could win because you had a better run game. You could shorten the game. You know what I mean? You could do all those things. This year, they're one of the worst teams in third down in the NFL. I think it's 51% they're giving up on third down, which is
where do you want to be? What's a healthy number from a defensive
for a defense? You want to be probably 28 to 30 or so like that. They're 51%.
Yikes!
They're giving up on third down.
It's kind of like the Cardinals on that opening drive last
That's
night.
Exactly
Seattle
right.
Just third down, third down.
And so when their defense isn't handling their part of the equation, because we talk about this all the time. We actually laud this Tennessee team and the way that they play. It's old school. Play good defense, run the football, play action pass, win old school, right? When one side doesn't hold up the bargain, and right now the defense isn't, you can't win, right? Because you're not prolific enough as an offense to come back and win games.
That's a great point.
That you're behind in. You know what I mean? So
I do.
They have to be symbiotic, and if they're not, it falls apart quickly.
Yeah, and maybe this is unfair to their roster, but I'm almost starting to get the impression, like if they weren't so well coached.
Yeah.
Like Vrabel's a terrific coach.
Yeah.
And Arthur Smith's going to be a head coach very soon.
I think you're right.
Maybe they're an 8-8 team.
Maybe.
I mean, really, when you look at Tennessee, and maybe they'll ultimately be 8-8. I probably like the Ravens this week. We'll see. Maybe it's in sharp Tierney, maybe not. I probably like the Ravens, and if the Ravens win, I don't know if I love the Ravens, but I think I like the Ravens.
Yeah.
If the Ravens win, suddenly Tennessee's 6-4. After an undefeated start. I mean, his swoon all started when they lost to the Steelers, and they didn't start that game well. That's one of the few games where they fell behind big, and they actually came back in that game. Remember that? They made it a little dicey, a little sweaty at the end. So, I'm going to ask you the question. Did they prematurely pay Ryan Tannehill, or did they give him too much money?
No, I think they gave him – I mean, they didn't break the bank. It's not like he's making $30 million a year.
It's pretty close. What's he getting paid?
20. I was looking at this earlier today. I want to say it's 26 or something like that. It's not.
When is it? When can you get out of it? At what point?
I'd have to look.
I think it's at least
remember.
3 years.
Yeah, probably.
I think it is.
I think you might be right about that, BT, and I'll look it up. But did they prematurely pay him? No, I don't think so. I think that you had to pay Ryan Tannehill the money because he's a starting quarterback in the NFL. His cap number this year is only 22. $22 million. He signed a deal, 37. Let's see, contract value. That's over the course of his career. I don't know his current contract. No, 4 years, $118 million. 4 years, $118 million. It's out after 21. They can get out after 21.
After next season, they can.
After 21, they can get out of it.
Not terrible then.
No,
and I'm not even saying that I want them to, but
no guaranteed salary in 22.
Oh, wow. So that's a hell of a deal then. That's a worthwhile deal. Got it. And the other thing, too, about the pressure or who needs to perform better in this game, it's got to be Tannehill because you can still say, hey, listen, Lamar's young.
Yeah, he's 25 years old, 26 years old. Yeah, exactly.
Lamar's not 26, is he?
I don't think he's much older than that, dude.
I think he's younger than that.
Let's
Lamar?
check. He's not old. I know that.
No, I think he's younger than 26. I'm agreeing with you. I think he's younger.
You're right, BT.
He's 24?
23.
23.
Yeah.
So he's got some space to grow and mature, and we think that he will. Won the MVP a year ago. Eventually he needs to slay these demons, and he needs to slay these playoff demons and these big game demons.
Yep.
And hopefully he will. I'm not fully convinced that he will. I need to see a more refined thrower, frankly.
I was impressed by the win against the Colts, and I remember saying this 2 weeks ago, BT, or a week ago, I should say, because it was the first game that he'd won when trailing at halftime.
That was one of the things he needed to slay.
That's right.
I think he was 0-6 or 0-9. 0-9, I think it was.
Well, no, I think the team was over the last 2 years, but he himself was 0-6.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, he's now 1-6 when trailing at halftime, which is a big deal. I mean,
I agree.
To be an elite quarterback, to be a championship quarterback in the NFL, just go ask Pat Mahomes. You got to be able to be down and sometimes down big and bring your team back. And he just hasn't been able to do that. And now he started to do that, but are we convinced that he's going to do that regularly?
I'm not. I'm hopeful.
No.
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful more than I am optimistic. That's kind of splitting hairs. To say that I'm optimistic, that implies that I ultimately believe that he will.
Yeah, that means
I'm going to stop short of that.
Yeah, it means you see it on a regular basis.
I'm saying I'm hopeful because I love what he brings to the table.
Agreed.
And I want to see him evolve. He's great for the NFL. I'm more hopeful than actually believe that it will happen. I'm not saying it won't, but I wouldn't bet money on it that it does. And I don't know. It's one of these games here where, it's just, you got to, and I keep looking at Tennessee more than I do the Ravens. They've really disappointed the last, you're 5-0 at one point. You're 5-0, and you've just completely lost your way. And
yeah, I remember looking at that Tennessee-Pittsburgh game as one of the games of the year.
It was on CBS. It was certainly rightfully touted as the game of the year up until that point.
And actually kind of lived up to it because
it was a good game.
Made it a game. But since that point, the Steelers have continued their undefeated ways, and the Tennessee Titans have lost 3 or 4.
You worried about the Steelers? I know that Tomlin addressed this as a trap.
I'm not at all. Not at all.
I
think they destroy the Jacksonville Jaguars. I do. Now, the kid Luton played pretty good.
It's not bad.
I know. He's not bad at all. He's not. There's no future. He's not like the future. Oh, they found their future.
What if there were guys saying this 20 years ago about Tom Brady?
Yeah.
He's not bad filling in for Drew Bledsoe, but he's got no future. Look at him.
Let's not forget, though.
You never know.
People forget this, BT, and it's such a disservice to the New England Patriots and how they were constructed. They were in the Super Bowl the year before. Drew Bledsoe took them to the Super Bowl. Let's not forget that. So it's not like Tom Brady inherited this horrible team. They had a great roster and a great coach, and at least a perfectly fit roster for the coach. So Tom Brady was in the right place at the right time. He took advantage of it. I'm not discounting any of his success.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell to be notified when we drop fresh content.